My first memory of this new existence is the pressure. It's not the weight of the snow. Snow is gentle, forgiving. This was something else. Crushing, suffocating pressure. Like the entire world had folded itself over me and decided I wasn't worth the space I occupied. It muffled the screams I didn't realize I was making, stole whatever thin strands of air I could drag into my lungs, and pressed me deeper into the cold, wet cradle of the earth. When I woke up buried, I didn't panic. Panic required energy I didn't have. All I felt was confusion and resignation. How long had I been under? Minutes? Hours? A whole night? The cold had crawled into my muscles, freezing them into slow, unresponsive blocks, and my thoughts were sluggish-like, trying to swim through mud. Every inhale was a serrated blade slicing down my throat. Something in me refused to die. I clawed upward with fingers that barely obeyed me. As cracked snow shifted, the first sliver of gray winter sky stabbed my eyes, and I erupted from the ground like some primitive beast forced back into life. I spat out ice, gasped like a newborn, and blinked at the endless, blinding white that surrounded me. The world was silent, too silent. I staggered to my feet, a shaking, frostbitten ghost wandering through a graveyard forest where the trees bowed under the weight of the storm. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how I got there. My memories were scattered flashes of running, hiding, the outbreak spreading like wildfire. The panic of those first weeks, the desperate instinct to stay unseen, to stay unimportant, to survive by being nothing. But waking up buried, that told me something had caught me. Or I had finally lost consciousness after days, maybe weeks of constant evasion. My body had simply collapsed, letting the snow bury me like an unmarked grave. The silence unnerved me more than the cold. Before the outbreak, silence had been a luxury. After it, silence meant you were being watched. Every step I took felt like I was walking across the surface of a frozen lake that could crack at any moment. The infected in this region weren't normal. Not like the ones near the cities. Those were loud, chaotic, ravenous. Here, they moved like ghosts. I would see them sometimes. In the cracks between the trees, frozen in place like statues mid-motion, their limbs twisted, their faces slack, their skin glazed with ice. Some stood as if listening. Others knelt like they were about to pray. A few reached skyward, mouths open as if calling out to someone. And then, when triggered, the bloody zombies moved with a horrifying burst of speed. Nothing human, nothing natural. A violent contradiction, frozen one second, animal fast the next. I kept going. I didn't have a choice. Freeze or move. Die or try. The storm gnawed at my exposed skin. My legs trembled with each step. The idea of dying out, here becoming a frozen statue, another cryptic figure in the snow, pushed me forward more than any hope ever could. I crested a ridge and saw it. A house. Not just a structure. A fortress. Thick walls reinforced with composite panels. Solar arrays half buried in snow. Perimeter fence crowned with motion sensors and old-world tech that still clung to life. It was too clean, too modern, too intact to belong in the wasteland I'd been trudging through. Rich people stuff. Preparedness like this wasn't luck. It was investment. Planning, privilege, the kind of place you built if you knew the end was coming and wanted to make. Sure you weren't part of the messy middle. I circled slowly, scanning for tracks, weapons, movement, anything to tell me whether the owners were alive, or dead, or something worse. I saw claw marks on the metal siding, bullet impacts, bloodstains half buried beneath fresh snow. Someone had tried to get inside before me, and it had ended badly. Maybe it was scavengers. Maybe it was one of those people who, after losing their own kids, stormed places like this out of desperation, believing replacement children were waiting inside like inventory. The house was a grave monument to every attempt before mine. I found a side window cracked open just enough to slip through. Inside was cold, not dead cold, but the cold of a place isolated too long, a place surviving on backup power and routine fear. The silence inside was worse than outside. Then I heard movement. Not the heavy, dragging steps of the infected. Lighter, controlled, intentional. I turned the corner and froze. A boy stood in the hallway, 10 years old, maybe 11, wearing mismatched winter gear, cold, alert eyes staring at me like I was an intruder in his castle. Behind him, hiding half a step behind his shoulder, was a little girl with tangled hair and trembling hands. Brooke. Her wide eyes darted between me and the hallway exit, calculating escape routes. But the boy Jackie didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He didn't cry or scream. He raised a toy gun. Only, it wasn't a toy anymore. The bright plastic shell of a Nerf blaster had been stripped and rebuilt. Wires running along the side, a CO cartridge taped under the barrel. I recognized the sound as he pumped it once, pressure loading into the chamber. A tranquilizer setup. Homemade, but clever. Professional, even. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to reassure. Jack didn't give me the chance. The dart hit my throat before I even finished inhaling. Burning numbness surged through my veins. My vision warped, the floor tilted. The world stretched and snapped like elastic. The last thing I saw was the boy stepping forward, expression unreadable, lowering the gun while never breaking eye contact. Hey. The last thing I heard was his quiet, steady voice. You should have stayed buried. And then everything went black as my eyes were closing due to tranquilizer effect. I woke up bound, not the sloppy, panicked knots of scavengers or raiders, but careful restraints, precise, calculated, and annoyingly effective. My wrists were tied with some kind of reinforced paracord. My legs were strapped down. My weapons, the tools that had kept me alive this long, were nowhere in sight. It was like waking up inside my own absence. The room around me was dim but clean. Thick concrete walls softened with insulation panels. A shallow blue glow hummed from emergency lights threaded along the ceiling. The house was silent except for the low hum of machinery, monitoring machinery, but monitoring systems. It reminded me too much of research labs I'd broken into during the outbreak. Sterile, smart, watchful. A sanctuary for someone else. A prison for me. Jack stood over me with the posture of someone twice his age, feet spread, weight balanced, eyes unblinking. He watched me the way a cat watches a trapped mouse. Not malicious, just analytical. He didn't hold the tranquilizer gun now. He didn't need to. His confidence was its own weapon. You're awake, he said. No relief, no fear, just a report of fact. His voice carried something more dangerous than hostility. Certainty. He listed the terms of my captivity like a child reciting rules taught too early, too harshly. If I tried anything, he'd neutralize me again. If I behaved, he'd return the weapons. If I helped, he'd guide me out. His tone had no tremble, no hesitation. It was the tone of someone who had already buried the version of himself that should have been playing with toys and dreaming of superheroes. I could see the history behind him, the past intruders, the way he kept glancing toward the reinforced door. The clean stains in the entryway. It's a permanent set of his jaw that belonged to someone who had survived adults making promises and breaking them violently. I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong to distrust me. He cut the restraints with the same precision he'd used to tie them, keeping 2 steps back, as if measuring the world. My arms felt numb, my throat dry, my mind still foggy from whatever chemical he'd shot me with. As I sat up, the room tilted slightly, and Jack didn't miss the stumble. Don't try anything, he said simply. I believed him. Our arrangement formed in a few clipped exchanges, cold. Transactional, utterly devoid of trust on his side and barely held together on mine. I would help him fix the issues in the house, the heating unit that cycled unpredictably, the perimeter fence that flickered during power surges, the outer defenses that had begun to weaken. Only then, he said, would he return my gear and let me go. Release was not a gift. It was a negotiation. As the hours unfolded into days, the contract between us shifted subtly. I started by repairing mechanical failures and patching weak spots along the fence. But Jack was never more than a few steps away from me, always watching, always evaluating. He blended high-tech security with improvised traps, analog spikes, tripwires, broken ceramic alarm lines. It was an unpredictable blend of genius and desperation, and I realized quickly that his creativity wasn't born from curiosity, it was born from fear. The infected outside. I saw more of them than I wanted to, through the security feeds, through the slits in the panels, through the cracks where light spilled out into a world without mercy. These zombies weren't like the usual ones, the city wanderers that groaned and sprinted and clawed. No, these creatures were suspended between two states, frozen mid-gesture like twisted art pieces, and then suddenly awakened by the slightest shift in sound or heat or instinct. Zombies' hunger wasn't constant. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Their rage wasn't stable. It flickered, unpredictable and directionless until something, anything, snapped it awake. Theses zombies circled the house like vultures, silent most days, frenzied on others, behaving in cycles I couldn't yet decode. The house felt like a statement someone had made, wealth thrown at the apocalypse, a stubborn refusal to accept extinction. But even with all its tech, all its systems, all its reinforced walls, it could not stop the truth gnawing at us. Nothing outside was contained. It seeped through cracks, through windows, through memories. Jack called me Dan, though I'd never told him that name. Maybe I'd muttered it before he dragged me inside. Maybe he just needed a name to attach to the drifter he chained. Or maybe he wanted distance names without stories. Despite myself, I became more than a prisoner, more than a mechanic. I became something between a threat and a necessity. And maybe, slowly, he began to realize I wasn't there to hurt them. Brooke helped with that. She was tiny, barely 2. Soft blonde curls flattened from long naps and little hands always clutching a blanket that had once been baby blue. She hummed to herself, a gentle, rhythmic sound that contrasted against the cold, empty world outside. She didn't understand the virus or the cycles or the creatures frozen outside the windows. She just existed, pure and bright, in a place built entirely from fear. She toddled near me one afternoon, eyes wide, unafraid. She touched my hand, her fingers warm despite the failing heat. I froze not from threat, but from something I hadn't felt in years. Recognition? Humanity? It hit harder than the cold ever had. Jack saw it too. He didn't like it, but he didn't stop her. Over time, his behavior grew stranger. He would be talking to me, explaining a weakness in the fence, or pointing out a patch of snow where movement had been suspicious. And then suddenly, he would tense. His face would pale. He'd clutch his stomach or brace against a wall. A tremor would run through him like electricity. His breath would stutter. He'd lock his jaw to hide the pain, but I saw it. Every time, he ran to the reinforced room at the back of the house. Every time he locked himself inside. Every time he didn't come out for hours. I pretended not to notice. I pretended not to care that I'd seen. But the silence after the door shut was different. Heavy. Telling, the infection wasn't just outside lurking in the woods. It was inside this home. Inside him. Jack wasn't guarding a fortress. Jack was guarding time. And I understood in one cold, painful tremor of my own, this house wasn't a safe haven. It was containment. And I was the uncontained thing they had let in. The routine was a lie. I didn't see it at first, not because it was well hidden, but because I wanted to believe the order. The structure, the predictability of this house. After months of wandering through a world that had lost its rules, I had accepted Jack's rigid rituals as survival, not deception. But the silence around him, it wasn't calm. It was a warning. Tension stretched so tightly it hummed. And eventually, it became too loud to ignore. I watched the shivers ripple under his skin. I saw the way he'd bite down hard on his lower lip to keep it from trembling. The tremors weren't fear, they were symptoms. Each time he told me he needed to check something or had to reset the circuits, I pretended not to notice how his steps quickened, how his breath stuttered, how panic flared in his eyes just briefly before he forced it down. I finally snapped the illusion when he tried to disappear into that reinforced room again. I blocked the hall, arms spread, tired of the half-truths. "What's happening to you, Jack?" His face shifted, a small boy caught in the crossbeam of accountability and terror. He wasn't used to being cornered. He wasn't used to being the one questioned. He stepped back, shoulders rising defensively, hands clenched into trembling fists. For a moment I thought he'd try to slip past me. He was quick enough to try. But there was something inside him that knew the lie couldn't stretch any further. The silence between us stretched until it became unbearable. Then he whispered, "I'm sick." 2 words that landed like gunfire, but sick didn't begin to touch the truth. It took time, long, strained minutes before he could say the rest. Before he could unspool the horror he had been carrying alone, before he could confess what he thought made him a monster, Jack was infected. Not like the ones outside. Not like the creatures frozen in grotesque poses waiting for sound or heat. Something inside him was different. The virus didn't consume him. Whole it cycled through him. He slipped between humanity and feral instinct, between clarity and predatory hunger. A transformation, a shift, a nightmare that didn't end when the sun came up. A werewolf without the moon. A monster on a timer. He tried to explain it clinically at first, as if it were just another structural flaw in the house he had learned to compensate for. He monitored his own symptoms the way others monitored. Weather patterns, pulses of heat creeping up his spine, pressure collecting behind his eyes. A dryness in his throat that signaled the beginning of the shift. He tracked them down to the minute. He lived on a schedule dictated by a virus that wanted to wear him like a suit. But what gutted me wasn't the infection. It was the awareness. He knew he would turn. He knew what he became. He remembered what he did. That was the cruelty the virus had gifted him, memory. The infected outside acted on instinct, detached from who they once were. They didn't suffer the burden of recollection. Jack, on the other hand, lived with the knowledge of every mistake, every broken object, every scream he might have caused in the dark. That thin thread of humanity made his curse infinitely worse. He told me the transformations weren't random. When he felt the shift coming, he locked himself inside the reinforced room. He'd built that room himself not with strength, but with stubborn ingenuity, sealing every weakness, installing every bolt, making sure he couldn't escape during the feral stage. His greatest fear wasn't death. It was hurting Brooke. That sentence nearly hollowed me. I had suspected symptoms. I'd considered the possibility of illness. But hearing him say it, hearing the tremble in his voice when he admitted that he fought not for his life, but to protect his little sister from himself, twisted something deep inside me. The next shift came sooner than either of us anticipated. Jack sprinted for the room, but not fast enough to outrun the wave of agony that hit him mid-hallway. I carried him, his small body trembling violently, heat radiating from him as though he were burning from the inside out. He begged me to lock the door. His voice splintered between human and something deeper, something feral lurking beneath the pitch. I did it. I locked him in. And then I stayed. I stayed because I needed to know the truth. I stayed because part of me already knew he wasn't lying. I stayed because if I didn't, his guilt would have destroyed him. The transformation was nothing like the infected outside. It was slow at first, painful. His bones didn't snap. They groaned. His body didn't mutate. Grotesquely, it shifted subtly, disturbingly. The virus threading through muscle memory and evolution like a malicious puppeteer. His screams turned into snarls, deep and guttural, like something ancient and wounded. His breaths came in ragged bursts, each one ripping through the walls like claws. The sound of his fingers dragging against the metal door was worse than anything I'd heard since the outbreak began. When it was over, when the snarling stopped and the room grew eerily silent, I waited. Minutes passed, then hours. Slowly, like dawn creeping over a battlefield, the boy emerged again. When he opened the door, he wasn't a threat. He was broken. His cheeks were pale, streaked with tear stains, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He couldn't meet my eyes. He stumbled, exhausted, and I caught him by the shoulders before he collapsed. That was the first time he didn't pull away from me. That was the first time I saw the child he was supposed to be, stripped of the armor he wore for Brooke. His voice cracked when he whispered, "Now you know, I did." And it left me with an impossible choice. Logic told me to kill him. The world outside had learned that any infected were too dangerous to risks. People had stopped believing in cures or exceptions or miracles. They killed threats before they had names. But Jack wasn't a threat. Not completely. He was a boy fighting a losing war inside his own skin. And something in me, something I thought had died long before. I ever found this house refused to be the executioner of a child who still fought to remain human. In that moment, the drifter I had been, the man who avoided attachments, who chose survival over morality, died quietly, and someone else took his place. Someone who understood that protecting Jack wasn't weakness. It was responsibility. And it was already too late to turn away. Just as that fragile, delicate rhythm of survival began to take shape, just as I started to believe that maybe in this frozen hellscape, I had carved out a pocket of safety with Jack and Brooke, the universe reminded me cruelly that peace is always temporary. The door sensors pinged. Brooke's head snapped up. Jack froze. Every instinct in me went straight to red alert. And then Melanie walked through the door. It was like watching a ghost materialize in real time. A silhouette blurred by frost, stumbling into the cold entryway, like someone who had outrun the end of the world itself. Brooke didn't hesitate. She broke into the kind of pure, unfiltered joy only a young child can still conjure in a dying world. She practically launched herself into her mother's arms. And Jack tried to stay stoic, but you could see at the crack in his armor, the tiny spark of hope fighting through years of fear and responsibility. For the first time since I met him, he looked like a kid again. But for me, my heart didn't soften. It clenched. Melanie's return was too convenient, too perfectly timed, too wrong. Her eyes held gratitude, yes, but behind them, blurred timelines. Off answers, excuses wrapped in rehearsed pauses. She told us she had been searching, moving, trying to get back to them. But I recognized what lay beneath that vague haze of misdirection. I'd seen it too many times. The eyes of someone who's been navigating human conflict, not infection. Someone who's been part of something organized and dangerous, something she wasn't ready to admit. Her presence didn't just shift the atmosphere inside that house. It detonated it. This place, this sanctuary, already strained by Jack's dark secret and my own desperate attempts to keep everything together, suddenly felt smaller. The air thicker, the walls tighter. Her return was supposed to be comforting. Instead, it was the beginning of our unraveling. I kept watching her closely. Her gear was wrong, too intact, too well maintained for someone who had been living on the run. Her boots carried more mud than snow, and her face wasn't the face of someone who'd trekked alone through these forests. Then came the truth, slow, accidental, pieced together through fragments she didn't intend to reveal. Melanie wasn't just running, she was being followed. Not by infected, not by drifters, but by people, organized, armed, coordinated. A militia. Militia with a leader who wasn't just searching for survivors, but specifically searching for her. Suddenly, everything slid into place with chilling clarity. Her hesitation, her vagueness, her urgency to leave immediately. She wasn't alone in the snow. She was the eye of a storm she had brought right to our doorstep. But for the children's sake, for the thin thread of trust forming between us, we decided to work together. Melanie insisted we had to head north, toward rumors of a fortified safe zone. She knew the house's time was up. Maybe she truly believed escape was possible. Maybe she believed she was saving them. Against my better judgment, I helped. We worked on the old car, the one frozen stiff from years of disuse. Jack gathered supplies. Brooke toddled around us, humming, blissfully unaware of the danger tightening around her life. For a moment, a single, fragile moment, it felt like hope, like a family preparing to flee the storm, but hope is a liar. It was Brooke who first reacted, a little gasp as she pointed toward the tree line. Then Jack's eyes widened. My blood ran cold. Movement, coordinated, too smooth, too synchronized to be infected. Dark shapes slipped between the pines, using advanced optics, moving in tactical formations. No feral unpredictability, this was a hunt. And Melanie? Her face drained of color the moment she sensed them, because she knew. She hadn't just been followed, she had been tracked. The militia wasn't closing in on us by accident. They were here for her and their leader, Brett Carson. A name I'd heard whispered in survivor camps months ago. A man known for enforcing control with a grip so tight it strangled entire communities. A man who looked at the apocalypse and saw opportunity, not tragedy. But the real gut punch wasn't who he was. It was who he was to her, Melanie's father. The children's grandfather, the missing piece of a fractured family tree, twisting its roots into the apocalypse. And Melanie she had known. She had always known. She didn't stumble back to her children in desperation. She let her pass straight to them, dragging danger behind her like a shadow she couldn't shake. My anger hit me like a physical blow. Not because she lied, not even because she put us at risk, but because she believed she could control the situation. That she could walk into this house, reclaim a family she'd abandoned, and manipulate the collision course she'd set in motion. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was betrayal wrapped in maternal instinct. This was a family imploding from the inside and outside. The militia stood ready to tear apart whatever pieces remained. The infected we had learned to understand. The wilderness we had learned to fear. None of it compared to the human threat now at our door. This wasn't containment. This wasn't survival. This was the beginning of the end. And I knew. From the moment I saw those shadows closing in through the trees, everything was about to burn. The shift from quiet dread to open, violent conflict didn't unfold gradually. It detonated, sudden, sharp, and catastrophic. One moment the forest outside was nothing more than a cold, unmoving wall of white. The next, it was crawling with men. Carson had arrived. His militia moved with precision like a blade sliding through silk. No wasted motion, no hesitation. They established positions with a discipline that only comes from months of enforcing their will onto others. These weren't scavengers or wanderers. They were an organized, occupying force, and their leader, Brett Carson, stood at the center of it all like a monument to everything the apocalypse had twisted in the human spirit. His voice echoed across the snow, amplified by a stolen military bullhorn. "Melanie kids, come out. It's time to come home. Enough running." He said it like he was calling in stray pets. Like the world falling apart meant nothing to him. The language was paternal. The tone was authoritarian. And underneath it all simmered something venomous in ownership. He wasn't here to protect them. He wasn't here to save anyone. He was here to reclaim what he believed belonged to him. His men spread out, rifles raised, scanning every possible exit. Drones hummed in the distance. Spotlights sliced through the trees. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was a siege. I felt it. A cold, sinking certainty that the dead weren't the real threat anymore. It was the living. The ones who still believed they deserved power. Carson embodied what happens when the world collapses and the wrong people survive. The virus hadn't made him dangerous. It had freed him. Freed him from laws, from limits, from consequences. His love for Melanie had decayed into something obsessive, controlling, monstrous. The apocalypse didn't change him, it magnified him. And standing behind him, trembling in her coat, was Melanie herself. I could see the recognition in her eyes, the fear, the guilt. She had brought this storm straight to the children she claimed she wanted to protect. I finally understood the moral inversion of this ruined world. I, the drifter, the loner, the man who woke buried beneath ice, was the protector. Carson, the father, the patriarch, the self-appointed savior, was the destroyer. The infected outside operated on instinct. They lunged, they snapped, they reacted. Carson operated on ideology, and ideology is far more lethal. The siege began with gunfire that cracked the air like frozen branches breaking under pressure. Returned fire with what little we had. The house, this fortress, shuddered as bullets tore through its steel siding. Jack was everywhere at once, darting between blind corners, activating traps, triggering fallback defenses. His small hands moved with the precision of someone who had rehearsed the end of the world since he was old enough to string a bow. I covered him, returning fire, bolting from room to room, trying to hold the perimeter. We worked as one, the old survivor and the child soldier. An impossible team built under impossible circumstances. Every defense we triggered, every trap we set off, bought us seconds, just seconds. But we fought for them like they were years. In the chaos, Melanie tried to negotiate, calling out to Carson, begging him to leave the children out of this, to take her instead. But Carson wasn't listening. He wasn't hearing anything. Because in his mind, this was already decided. This was order being restored. Then the moment came, the one that split our fight clean in half. Near the utility shed, the fighting grew savage, close, desperate. Smoke rolled across the snow. Gunshots echoed like thunder. And then a sound sliced through all of it. Small voice, startled cry. Brooke. She had wandered toward the noise, maybe searching for her mother. Maybe following the echo of my voice. Maybe just trying to reach the warmth of the shed. I saw her, just for a second. Flash of a tiny coat. A little outstretched hand. Then one of Carson's men saw movement and fired. A cry, that single fractured sound. Then silence. A silence so absolute it felt like the world itself exhaled and died. The snow swallowed her body. The smoke hid her from view. and the battle kept going. But something in me broke. Brooke had been the thread tying us back to humanity, a tiny spark proving that innocence still existed in this dying world. And just like that, she was gone. I didn't have time to mourn. Not then. Not in that storm of bullets and screams. But somewhere deep inside me, something shifted. Everything we were fighting for hardened into resolve. Brooke's death became the spine of the battle, the thing that kept me moving even when my legs buckled from exhaustion. And then, in a brutal grapple with one of Carson's men, knife against axe, blood spraying against the snow, I felt something. A slice, a sting, a wet heat, an open wound. His arm had been smeared with infected blood, dark, tar-like, unmistakable. It dripped into the cut before I could react. My heart seized, my breath caught. It was small, barely noticeable in the chaos. But I knew. I knew exactly what it meant. In this world, infection wasn't a rumor. It wasn't a myth. It was a death sentence, or worse, a transformation. I hid it, wiped the blood, clenched the wound shut, buried the terror under adrenaline. Jack didn't need to know. Melanie didn't need to know. Not yet. But as I returned to the fray, as I fired, shouted, bled, pushed, I could already feel it. A deep, unnatural warmth blooming beneath the skin, a pulse that didn't belong to me. The seed was there, the same seed that lived inside Jack, the harbinger of what I might become. The war outside raged on. The war inside me had just begun. And in that moment I understood my final purpose in this world wasn't to survive. It was to sacrifice, to redeem, to ensure that what happened to Brooke would never happen again. The end wasn't coming. It was already inside me. The moment the battle quieted, the world shrank. The ringing in my ears faded, the smoke drifted away. The winter air cut through the heat of combat, but none of that mattered. All of it dissolved under a single, merciless truth pulsing beneath my skin. I was infected. The wound I received during the siege wasn't just a cut, it was a sentence. At first, it felt like lingering adrenaline. A pounding heartbeat, a little heat, but then the symptoms sharpened, creeping, rising fever, an unnatural tremble in my hands, tightening in my jaw as if something inside me was bracing, preparing. I had seen all of this before, not in myself, but in Jack. Every cycle I had helped him endure. Every tremor I'd watched take over his small frame. Every shift that turned him from a brilliant, terrified boy into a monstrous, feral thing. It was unfolding in me now. Exactly the same way. Exactly the same pattern. Except for one horrifying difference. Jack had containment. I did not. The realization hit me like a blunt force trauma to the chest. Everything I had done to protect the children, every trap, every night of vigilance, every hard choice meant nothing now. I was no longer a guardian. I was an uncontained threat sealed inside the same walls I swore to keep safe. And the timing could not have been worse. Carson wasn't retreating. He was regrouping. Outside, I heard the muffled sounds of his militia gathering for a final. Decisive assault shouts, gun checks, the crunch of boots through snow as they repositioned. Oh, they had tasted resistance and loss. Now, they were coming to reclaim what they believed was theirs, or destroy it entirely. If I hid, if I locked myself away, if I tried to slow the transformation, Jack and Melanie would die. The calculus of survival narrowed into a razor-thin line, one with no clean or honorable option. Either I contained myself, or I contained the threat outside. I couldn't do both. My heart hammered harder as the fever climbed. I could feel the virus awakening like claws scraping the inside of my skull. A primal roar building behind the walls of my thoughts. Images flashed in my mind, violent and feral, memories bleeding into instinct. I didn't have hours. I barely had minutes. And then in the thick of that terror, one thought sparked, a desperate, impossible idea. What if I didn't wait for the transformation? What if I forced it? The idea was monstrous, unthinkable, but the logic was brutal and perfect. Jack's variant was tied to stress, adrenaline, emotion. I had seen it. I had studied it. His shifts were predictable because they were triggered by internal extremes: fear, rage, pain. And I had all three. Couldn't trust myself to stay human long enough to fight as a man. But as a monster, as the beast the virus wanted me to become, I could tear through Carson's forces with a ferocity no gun or trap could match. Brooke's absence weighed heavy on that choice, her tiny shoes still lying by the kitchen door, her quiet humming echoing in my memory. Oh, the gentle way she held my finger when she wanted comfort. She was gone, and the rage of that loss burned hot enough to melt the snow around me, so I made my decision. I would not die helpless. I would not turn in a locked room. I would not become a threat to the family I had found. I would become a weapon, a monster aimed not inward, but outward. Before the fever took hold completely, I forced myself to move. My body shook with each step, the infection burning through my veins like acid. But I reached the children, Jack and Melanie, and guided them to the deepest, most fortified part of the house. The room built for cold storage, reinforced steel, mechanical locks unaffected by the failing power grid. Jack watched me with unsettling clarity. He saw the tremor. He saw the sweat. He saw the truth. "Don," he whispered, voice cracking, "you're turning." I couldn't lie anymore. But I also couldn't tell him the whole plan. "I'm buying you time," I said softly. "That's what matters." He didn't cry. He didn't scream. Simply nodded with the heavy, terrible understanding of a child who had grown up too fast, too hard. Melanie didn't understand, not fully, but she knew enough. Something in her face broke when she looked at me. Pity, fear, regret. I locked the door, the final barrier between them and what I was about to become. Alone in the dim corridor, I leaned against the cold wall and exhaled a shaking breath. My limbs spasmed, bones tightening, the virus clawing upward into my skull. My vision doubled, my heart thundered. This was it. Dan the Drifter, the man who escaped the world by living in its shadows, was done. Dan the Guardian, the man who found purpose in a found family, was done. What rose next would be something else entirely, something violent, something unstoppable, something I would use to end Carson's reign, even if it tore my humanity apart in the process. The last coherent thought that flickered through my mind was simple. If I must become a monster, let me become their monster. Then I gave in. I let the transformation take me, not as a victim, but as a weapon forged in grief, desperation, and love. And the beast opened its eyes. The first crack of wood splintering from the gate snapped through the night like a gunshot. Carson's militia had finally breached the outer defenses. Their boots crunched across the frozen ground in unified strides, the rhythm of men trained for violence. Floodlights swept across the snow, slicing through the darkness in long, harsh beams. Shadows stretched, flickered, and crawled across the yard. That was my signal. Instinct surged through me, hot, corrosive, primal, but my mind stayed eerily calm. I could feel the virus sharpening inside my blood, like a blade pressing outward against my veins. Every pulse hammered with the promise of something monstrous. But for the first time since infection turning into zombie, I had control. A strange, sick clarity settled over me. Every breath felt heavier, like my lungs were preparing for their final moments as human organs. The world around me narrowed into a tunnel of purpose. I took the blade. My hand shook not with fear, but with the agonizing awareness of what I was about to do. The cold metal kissed my skin. The moment felt painfully intimate. The sharp edge, the first sting, then the sudden warmth of blood running down my arm. The shock flooded through me like lightning. I had forced the viral shift. I wasn't losing my humanity by accident. I was choosing to let it go. A sudden burning flooded my spine. My jaw clenched as the virus took over. The world tilted, brightened, sharpened sounds stretching and shrinking in unnatural waves. My nails tore against the floor. My muscles convulsed, reshaping, twitching violently under the surface. There was no slow descent into madness. It was an explosion. Adrenaline, fear, grief, fury, they all erupted at once. My skin felt too tight for my bones. The world was brighter and darker, all at the same time. I could hear the thumping of Carson's men's hearts, smell the metal of their rifles, taste the electricity in the air. The memories of Don the Wanderer, the lost man, flickered like dying embers. But Brooke's innocent voice, the ghost of her laughter, that was the spark. The transformation snapped into place. And suddenly, I was no longer Dan. I became the feral protector. My body moved before thought. A blur of motion tore across the snow. The cold didn't touch me. In this state, the night belonged to me. Carson's militia barely had time to shout before I was upon them. The destruction unfolded in a frenzy. But it wasn't blind brutality. It was intention. Every strike was calculated. Every kill was for them, Jack and Melanie. My claws, my teeth, my speed, they were all guided by human intellect buried deep under the beast. The horror of the variant, the nightmare that had haunted us, became the thing that protected us. Carson's militia scrambled. Their formation broke, their confidence shattered. Gunfire lit up the yard, but bullets only grazed me. Pain was irrelevant. Their shouts turned to screams, swallowed by the snarling roar I didn't recognize as my own. I hunted with purpose. My target was unmistakable. Carson. He stood near the vehicle, shouting orders, face pale in the lights. The moment our eyes met, something in him cracked. He saw exactly what I had become, what he had driven me to. Then chaos swallowed his voice. When the final soldier fell, silence rushed in so violently it felt like the world itself exhaled. Snow drifted gently down, mocking the carnage beneath it. The once pristine white ground was now torn apart, stained, reshaped by violence. Carson's militia was gone, their threat erased. The wind howled across the tree line, softening the edges of reality. Smoke lifted from the homestead, our home curling toward the sky like a signal flare in a dead world. Somewhere beneath that smoke, I heard them. Jack's steady breathing. Melanie's quiet sobs. Alive, safe, because the monster was outside. My vision blurred as human memory faded. The sounds of their voices grew distant, muffled, like echoes underwater. The cold bit deeper into my bones. The last remnants of Dan drifted away like ash carried by the wind. Dan, the man, was gone. Only the creature remained, but his legacy endured. Jack and Melanie were shielded from immediate danger. The siege was over. The threat outside had been destroyed by the very horror everyone feared, and yet survival carried a brutal cost. Brooke was gone. Melanie was shattered. Jack was left holding the weight of a world too cruel for someone his age. They knew the truth. Dan had sacrificed his humanity, his soul for them. The final image lingered like a scar on time. Jack, Brooke's brother, sat behind the reinforced walls of the safe room, knees pulled to his chest. He stared silently at the small window, watching the tree line where something moved. Something tall, fast, silent. He knew it was me, the protector who had saved him, the monster who might return, a tragedy he could never escape. The air felt heavy, charged with uncertainty. Would the feral protector remain their guardian, or eventually turn on the very people he had died to save? The cycle of life and undeath remained unbroken. And somewhere in the frozen dark, the creature that had once been Dan vanished into the wilderness, leaving behind a silence more terrifying than any scream.